let's get this thing put back together. Hey, welcome to my home shop for a little sidebar here. So these are the emergency brake assembly thingies for the Blazer. And I was just figuring out the emergency brake hardware. As you can see, that this is the old stuff, and that's not exactly any condition I want to reuse. But one thing I found is that these boots are no longer available anywhere that I could find. But these are very similar looking, but I think these fit the same year's full-size Chevy trucks, like the 1500s and stuff. So as you can see, they look pretty similar, but this flange is a lot wider and also a lot thicker. And I'll put the part number down at the bottom here. This is a Dorman part number. These are really inexpensive, everybody has them. So I decided to take a gamble, and sure enough, they work just fine with a little bit of trimming. So here's what I trimmed off, and essentially you just cut it down around this groove and then slice it thinner, essentially up to that flat part as well, and it will fit. So I just wanted to cut in and show that little trick. Now we'll go back to the Blazer. Well, I'm calling it a day. I just have to swap the hoses on the calipers over, bleed the brakes. And then all I have to do down here, scrape off that gasket mating surface, put on the diff cover, and fill it with fluid. That is it. I wasn't too pleased with how this whole emergency brake thing went together. There was a lot of interference with the shoe and the inner drum, and I actually had to take a file and file off a layer of that shoe to even get the thing on there, and that's with the adjuster all the way in. So I don't know what the deal is with that. I mean, I don't really care. If it's dragging a little bit, it won't drag for very long. Probably never use it. I just didn't want to put it back together without an emergency brake because it was just tacky. However, it's together now. You might have saw me struggling with getting the axle shafts in. I had to kind of tap them in with the hammer. I assume just because I have old splines on the axle shafts and then a brand new rear end gear that was just cut, so it's never actually had axles in it. So I probably should have test fit it before I put it in the car, but once it was in the car, all I could really do was just tap it in and send it home. But I don't think it should matter. Everything else went together fine. So that's going to be it for today. I'll be back, I suppose, next week to wrap this up, and that should be a pretty smooth day. So we'll see you next week. Okay, well, brakes are hooked back up and bled. Differential's put back together and full of fluid. Nothing is dripping, so I think we're good. Unfortunately, I have to call it a day because I gotta go rush to get to dinner with the family. So it looks like either later this afternoon or tomorrow, get some wheels on and see if this thing moves. It's my first time completely going through a rear end and putting it back together, and so you know how it goes. You just got a little pit in the bottom of your stomach. Please work and don't just make a loud clunk and stop. If that happens, I'll probably just light this on fire and push it into the road. See you soon. Start it up and see if the wheels turn when I put it in gear. God, I hope so. They're real hard to turn with the 4-way lug wrench, I think, because those emergency brakes are kind of dragging. They'll wear in. I guess that's a good sign. Okay, well that was not happy because the brake pedal went all the way to the floor. So I think I need to bleed the brakes again. So that's why it made that awful sound. Back to bleeding the brakes. Well, I guess this chapter is done. As you saw in that clip, the back wheels turned and I just hit the brakes, put it into park, and it made a horrible grinding noise because the wheels didn't stop. So I spent an hour. I took the wheels back off, bled the brakes, went back and forth.
Back and forth, back and forth.
Every time I did it, it seemed like I had to pump like crazy to get any brake fluid out. So I just thought I had a whole bunch of air in the calipers that was kind of like finding its way
back and forth, back and forth.
And I thought if I just go back and forth enough, eventually I'll get all the air out. Well, it got to a point where I wasn't getting really much of anything out because that thing I used to bleed the brakes, that hose, sticks into a little bit of brake fluid in the bottom. So if it was pushing air, I'd see bubbles, and it wasn't. Well, then I got to thinking, this thing has always had kind of a soft brake pedal, and I bled the brakes, I replaced the master cylinder, I'd done all kinds of work. It was always soft. I didn't freak out about it too much because it stopped. I don't think I've ever had rear brakes as long as I've had this, because that would explain why the pedal was so soft and why bleeding the brakes didn't seem to help and replacing the master cylinder didn't seem to help. So I thought maybe it was a proportioning valve or something, and I don't see a proportioning valve. It looks like it comes right out of the master cylinder and goes into an ABS module. I know my ABS works, so I assumed that was good. I'm not really sure how it works, but you know that I'm gonna go home tonight and start looking into it and figuring it out because I think I still have a brake problem. Hey, it's Mark from the future. So I'm driving the Blazer. It's working great, not making any weird clunks. The brakes are still soft, but after extensive research, I'm pretty sure I have air in my ABS module. To bleed that, you kind of need a scan tool. There's some other tricks you can do to get the ABS module to activate and let the air out, but they're all kind of sketchy and complicated, and I just don't even want to deal with it. So I just stopped by my favorite shop down the street that does all my tire stuff and brake stuff and whatever I need. Talked to them and they said, no problem, bring it in, we'll get the air out, we'll bleed the brakes, it'll be great. So I'm doing that next week. There's no reason to panic or freak out about it. I'm just gonna drive it for a week with mushy brakes and it'll all be sorted next week. So we now return to Mark of the past, who is sad and forlorn. But I'm gonna close this chapter. So thanks for watching this one, and apparently we'll see you in the next part. Thanks for watching.